11:21, 21 minutes after the hour, back here at Pagitt Radio, and talking with Jeff Sharlet, the author of the book The Family, The Secret Fundamentalism at the Heart of American Power. And Jeff, I think we were talking before the break here, I think one of the most important critiques that you're bringing about the family, in addition to their secretiveness, is the idea of the family altogether, that they want to run a certain kind of religious community for the purpose of influencing power and being people of political power, and to achieve greater political power for their ideas, as opposed to a religious expression that wants to speak truth to power and defend those who are hurt and who are abused by it. And I think your critique is right on. And from what I've known of the family, all the way from prison fellowship and some folks that I knew back in the 90s who were part of the family in Washington, it really does have an attitude of the place that you're going to cause world change and the place you're going to extend the agenda that God might have for the world is through political power. And I think you're raising a critique of that that's quite important.
Yeah, well, there's a Christian blogger who looking at all this, looking at the way the family works, and the statement by the leader Doug Coe, we work with power where we can, build new power where we can. He said, look, if Jesus had been, pleasant schmoozy lunches with Pontius Pilate, this was not actually. They say they're followers of Jesus. This was not the Jesus model, and nor was this idea that they developed that Jesus had one set of teachings for.
Hey, sorry, Jeff. I think we dropped you there from the call. I don't know. I don't know.
Doug, have I still got you?
Yeah, we still got you. Thanks. Yeah,
Sorry about that.
We dropped you about the time you were saying that if you look at the Jesus story, his agenda was not to have one story for the poor and another story for the wealthy and powerful. Oh, that's a shame. I think we lost Jeff. Maybe we'll try a reconnection with him. The point that Jeff is bringing up, and he brings up in his book, is that there's sort of a rewriting by this evangelical secretive group to say, look, there's two things that should be happening. One is to have the message that goes to the poor, to the left out, to the let down, and the left behind. And then there's the other story that goes to the power brokers and to those who are in positions of power. And it's that kind of split that, to a lot of us, this kind of idea that you have two different messages, one for leaders and another for followers, that really creates an imbalance in Christianity and really creates an imbalance in religion as a whole and can be quite dangerous. And I think Jeff brings it out in his book. Jeff, do we have you back with us now?
Doug, I think I'm here. Sorry about that. I think I was able to hear what you're saying, and I think you're really hitting it on the head. I mean, it came out this summer when Governor Mark Sanford, in explaining why he was going to stay in office despite having abandoned his post. I mean, his affair was the least of it. He abandoned his post, abandoned his responsibilities. And he had called for other people. He had called for Bill Clinton in a similar situation to resign. Well, why wasn't he going to resign? He said, I'm like King David. He said, King David, I'm like King David. When he said that just struck a nerve, because that's a core teaching of the family. In fact, you can hear Doug Coe, the leader, talking about it at the Idaho State Prayer Breakfast online if you Google that. The idea, as it was explained to me when I was living with him, and this is a story I tell in the beginning of the book, was that King David, of course, does some terrible things, right? He seduces another man's wife. He arranges to have that man killed, and yet still God loves him. Why is this? And to illustrate this, David Coe, the son of Doug Coe, and another leader in the group, turns to a young man and he says, suppose I hear you raped 3 little girls, what would I think of you? And this young guy, being a human being, says, you think I'm a monster. And David Coe says, no, I wouldn't, because you're chosen. And when you're chosen, you're not supposed to do these terrible things, but if you do, it doesn't matter. You're chosen for power. God has put you in that position of power. And just like Governor Sanford, who can cheat and lie and abandon his job, he's still, from his perspective, from the family's perspective, chosen for power. This is a fundamentally anti-democratic, and I would also argue anti-Christian, and because we're talking about the King David story, anti-Jewish too. This is an abomination if you actually read and care about the message of Scriptures.
Yeah. And when you raise that kind of critique for people in the family, I know you spent time with them and you've gotten to know them, and your critique is, it's yours, but you did your work to be close to what's going on and to try to tell the story honestly. I think they wouldn't argue with your statement that what they're trying to do is create basically two sets of rules, one for the chosen and powerful, and then the other gospel for those who don't have access to that power.
Well, that's stated explicitly in their own documents in the archives, that Jesus had these sort of separate set of messages, and that Christianity should be understood on a model of concentric rings of power and closeness to Christ, and that there's an inner circle, and that's them, and there's an outer circle, and that's the rest of us.
And that's why I think you're critiquing calling this a secretive fundamentalism, because that's really at the heart of fundamentalism, whether it's in Christianity or other religions or in any kind of social structure.
Calling and elitism,
right.
And special entitlement, exactly.
Yeah, special entitlement that goes to those people, and it's really nobody else's business because they truly couldn't understand, because they're not a part of the chosen group. And I'm sure that they would show passages from the stories of Jesus that have him with his disciples saying, I'm going to speak certain things to you and you're going to understand them, and to everyone else I speak in parables and they're not going to. Is that the kind of argument that they're making?
That's the kind of argument they're making, but they're taking it one step further to sort of suggest that this is a model for worldly power, and that this is and there's another element of fundamentalism there, which is that they're reading a text in a very literal sense. And that's because part of what their theology is about is discarding history. They speak of something called Jesus plus nothing. That means, and as they put it, that means no morality, no ethics, no history.
Just Jesus straight up.
And that's the important part of this to me.
Yeah.
The history matters. When I speak to people in the family, and I still do, and we try and have these productive conversations, and I say, all right, maybe you're trying to do a good thing here, but tell me about Somalia. Tell me about Somalia as a terribly devastated country. They were involved with the dictator there. They introduced the dictator to American defense contractors. They facilitated the massive buildup of the military there, which was then turned on its own people in one of a killing of biblical proportion. What's their response? Is it we did something terrible there, we made a mistake, or here's why we think that's a good thing? None of that. It's ancient history. Well, not to the people of Somalia.
Yeah, they've just moved on. Right. Now, let me ask you, as you poked around, I'm sure people hear this and they're like, well, okay, at least there's some Christians that are having this influence, because I know that every other lobbying group, every other pact, every other perspective has its own power brokers in Washington, and they're influencing it. Is there anything else that you've discovered that's anything similar to this, having this kind of influence in this sort of way in Washington?
Well, and on this, I'll turn to the words of David Quo, former special assistant to President Bush in his first term, and one of the guys who was really the key figures in bringing about the Faith-Based Initiatives Project, certainly a prominent Christian voice himself, and says he describes the family as sort of having unparalleled influence. He says there's nothing like it, and nothing comparable in its reach into governments around the world. The other distinction that I'd make there to people who want to make that case is to talk about these lobbies. You know what those other lobbies are? They're lobbies. They're registered as lobbies.
Yeah, and these folks don't register as lobbies. They exist as a network or even as a church for a while, and then wanted to reject that whole thing. Jeff, I appreciate so much you being on the show and the good work that you've done. What Jeff brings up is something that we all have to think about, and that's how does religion express itself in the public sphere. That's Jeff Sharlet. The book is called The Family. You should pick it up, and you should look at it, and we should all do something about it. Jeff, thanks again for being on Doug Pagitt Radio. Religious radio that's not quite right on AM 950 and DougPagittRadio.com.